The Mary culture pre-colonial had always been fearful of risk. War was a good reason for this. When the firm got too aggressive, it often got burned. Merrill, after all, was the firm that persuaded Orange Country to trade derivatives in the early, resulting in the country's bankruptcy and a hook black age and a $30 million fine for Merrill. During the early days of mortgage-backed securities, a Merrill Lynch mortgage trader named Howard Rubin lost millions on one trade. That loss was big enough that Merrill stayed away from taking significant risks in the mortgage business for a year. Anytime a trader lost recalls a former Merrill trader, it was like the Spanish Inquisitions. You couldn't take big risks without accepting the possibility of big losses, and that was something that Merrill just couldn't stomach. Taking a lot of risks just wasn't part of its culture, and it pushed her to change that. According to former Merrill executives, he was constantly asking the various desks why they weren't taking on more risk. Sometimes when he saw the firm's bar number, he would actually get angry. It wasn't high enough, which to him meant that Merrill wasn't taking the kids a risk it should be taken. He banked his department heads when they wanted to hear aggressive young Turks while getting rid of those who didn't have the risk appetite he was looking for, and he constantly compared Merrill performance to Goldman's. You didn't you didn't want to be in Stan's office on the good day Goldman reported earnings. Recalls one of his former lieutenants. Everybody on Wall Street had a big mortgage desk, Mary Lynch included. By the time O'Neill became CEO, they were all beginning to focus on underwriting collateralized debt obligations that included at least some percentage of subprime mortgage. With this new CDO market up for grabs, Merrill decided to go all in. Within just a few years, Merrill was the dominant under underwriter of CDOs, taking the business from 9 CDOs deals north $2.2 billion in to 38 deals worth nearly it went from 15 into raking to fifths. Merrill Lynch underwrote 100 CDOs, 27 more than runner-up Citigroup. Merrill Lynch management viewed its number one ranking has proved positive in cold-play with the big boys, and that ranking becomes something to be persevered at all costs. The men who had the ultimate authority over the mortgage desk for Merrill Lynch in those days was a veteran trader named Jeff Grontal. He had spent his career around mortgage-backed securities. While still in his 20s, he had run the mortgage desk for Lee Ranieri at Salomon Brothers. Grontal had joined Merrill in the late just a few years after Anil's overseeing its trading desk until the mind. When he took over its derivatives business, although he spent much pushing a reluctant merely to take more trading risk, he thought its stepped risk limited limits constrained its ability to make sizable profits. He also had a healthy fear of mortgage-backed securities. He had watched them get increasingly risky over the years. His essential view was that Merrill's role should be to create structures that Hollywood investors to gain the exposure to risks they wanted to take, but Merrill itself should never assume those risks. They are things you want to sell, not hold. He used it to tell the traders who worked for him in O'Neill's push to have the firms take one more risk. Control found himself in a tricky position. He had he had a few run-ins with Anils over the years, but Patrick and Zachariah, but good friends of his, had persuaded him to stay. Once they were won, Control didn't have any protectors in the executive suite. More important, everyone around him was creating serious has fast as they called. Control boss Don Kim headed of fixed income. Stan was constantly pounding on him about why we weren't making as much in fixed income as Lehman or Goldman, says a former Merrill executive. As O'Neill pushed Kim pushed Control.